look at some of the changes that have been made to the Rover 600 range, and we'll start with the airbag system. Up to now, we've fitted the SRS2 system, which has an airbag on the driver's side only. But now we can offer a system with the airbag on the passenger's side too, and it's called the SRS3 system. The main components in the system are the SRS unit located in the centre console, the driver's airbag in the steering wheel with a cable reel underneath it, and a passenger airbag in the fascia. The SRS warning light is in the instrument panel. The heart of the system is the SRS unit. It contains sensors and a microprocessor. The sensors react to the collision impact and signal the microprocessor, which computes them and triggers the airbags to inflate.
The SRS unit also contains a self-diagnosis circuit. When the ignition is turned on, the SRS warning light illuminates and then goes out after about 6 seconds if the system's working normally. If the light doesn't come on, or doesn't go out after 6 seconds, or comes on while driving, it indicates a fault which must be investigated as soon as possible. Do it like this. First, you have to locate the service check connector under the fascia on the passenger's side. It's a blue 2-pin connector and must not be confused with another blue connector near it, which has 3 pins. Make sure the ignition is turned off, then bridge the terminals of the connector. Now turn the ignition on. The SRS warning light will come on for about 6 seconds, then go out. Immediately after that, it'll start to blink the diagnostic trouble code, or DTC, to identify the fault. If the fault is a continuous failure, the DTC will be indicated repeatedly. If it's an intermittent failure, the light will indicate the fault once, then stay on. If there is more than one fault, for example a continuous failure and an intermittent failure, both DTCs will be indicated as continuous failures. If the system is normal, that is, no DTC, the light will show continuous short blinks. After you've rectified the fault, you then have to erase the DTC memory, otherwise it'll continue to register it. You can erase the memory by turning the ignition off, then remove the bridge in the service check connector. Locate the memory erase signal connector. It's this 2-pin connector under the fascia on the driver's side, and bridge its terminals. Turn the ignition on. The SRS warning light will come on for about 6 seconds. When it goes off, you must remove the bridge you just fitted to the memory erase connector within 4 seconds. The SRS light will then come on again, and you must reconnect the bridge within 4 seconds. The SRS light will go out again, and then you only have a maximum of a further 4 seconds to finally remove the bridge. If you've done it right, the SRS light will blink twice to tell you that the memory has been erased. If for any reason you have to remove the steering wheel, you must first turn the steering to put the road wheels in the straight ahead position. Then remove the centre pad, complete with its airbag. When refitting, it's important to fit the cable reel correctly. Turn it clockwise until it stops. Then turn it anti-clockwise by approximately 2 turns until this yellow gear tooth lines up with the alignment mark on the cover. And the arrow mark on the reel label points upwards. It's very important that both these marks align, or the cable will not operate correctly.
So much for the SRS3 airbag system. So let's move on to look at some of the new chassis features on the Rover 600. The T-Series turbo engine has been introduced, and this has required a number of changes. For example, the cylinder block has been adapted to take in a new sump and front engine mounting bracket. The special sump has a torque rod location. The rod goes from the sump to the suspension rear beam. There are new exhaust manifold fixings and new lightweight pistons. The power steering pump has a valve change to suit the Honda steering system. The power unit is fitted with the gearbox on the left-hand side of the engine bay. That is opposite to the Honda unit, and all the front suspension beams have been changed to accommodate the new unit. Incidentally, it's essential that when you use a trolley jack at the front of the car, you must jack here under the towing eye at the front of the centre beam. If you jack anywhere else, you'll cause damage. The suspension is modified to give a sports tune, new front springs and dampers, and a stiffer rear anti-roll bar, along with the new 16-inch alloy wheels with Pirelli tyres. We recommend that Pirelli replacements should always be fitted. The 2.3-litre 600 is now fitted with a cruise control system similar to the 800. The ECU is located on the driver's side at the bottom of the A-post.
Set and resume switches are on the steering wheel, providing instructions to the ECU through a slip ring. The main cruise on switch is combined with the heated rear window switch in the fascia.
The Bosch ABS 2E anti-lock braking system is fitted to Rover engine 600s, and it uses a fixed relays modulator. Don't forget that although the relays don't seem to be rigidly fixed on this type of modulator, you must not try to remove them. You can identify the modulator by its cover, which is level with the top of the modulator valve chamber. On Honda engine 600s, a BY4 anti-lock braking system is now fitted when specified. It's a new system, so we'll look at it in more detail. The hydraulics are all in one assembly. An ECU is located underneath the centre console. Incidentally, to service the ECU, you must remove the complete centre console. Don't attempt to prise up the gear lever veneer finisher, you'll break it. The ECU operation is similar to the previous system. Its main function being the logic section, taking inputs from the wheel sensors, calculating the vehicle reference speed and controlling the modulator solenoid valves. Its sub-functions are to control the modulator pump, the fail-safe relays and the self-diagnosis system. The construction and function of the pulsers and wheel speed sensors hasn't changed, and an air gap of 0.4 to 1 millimetre applies to all the wheels.
As I said before, the hydraulics are all in one assembly, this modulator. It contains the pump to supply high-pressure fluid, an accumulator to store it, a pressure switch to control accumulator pressure, and then the solenoid valves, pistons, etc., to control pressure to the brake calipers.
Fail-safe relays for the system are behind the fuse and relay box at the right-hand rear of the engine bay. If a fault is detected, the relays are de-energised, which in turn cuts the electrical supply to the solenoid valves. They're then prevented from operating and the ABS system is deactivated.
Now a word about diagnosis. You'll find the maintenance and diagnostic connector under the passenger seat. It's used for microcheck simulation testing and when bleeding the high-pressure system. You'll find the diagnostic connector for fault codes at the bottom of the A-post, the left-hand A-post on the right-hand drive cars like this one, and at the right-hand post on left-hand drives. Incidentally, make sure you find the 2-pin connector and not the 3-pin connector near it. To make the diagnosis, first bridge the fault code's diagnostic connector and switch on the ignition. Don't start the engine. The ABS warning light will come on for 2 seconds to check that the bulb is working and then go out. After 2 more seconds, the light will then flash any fault codes present in the ECU, up to a maximum of 3, each separated by a 5-second pause. If you want to repeat the codes, turn the ignition off and on again. When you're ready to clear the ECU memory, simply remove fuse B2 in the ABS relay and fuse box. It's the middle fuse in this row. Just keep it out for more than 3 seconds, and don't forget to take out the bridge in the diagnostic connector.
Incidentally, if you're using MicroCheck, it can only see hard faults. That is, faults that are present at the time it's used. If the vehicle has an intermittent fault, it will not necessarily be present when MicroCheck is on. But you can still identify that fault by looking at the warning light flash code. Next, checks and servicing. If you need to do any work on the modulator fluid system, you must relieve the high fluid pressure like this.
Remove the bleed nipple cap, fit a wrench to the nipple, connect a bleed tube and slowly open the nipple up to 1/4 of a turn. Don't open it quickly, there's about 3000 psi in there and you might get a nasty surprise. Keep the nipple open until the fluid stops running, then tighten it. The fluid pressure in the system has now been relieved and you can work on the component parts. For example, if you have to change the modulator itself, after relieving the high pressure, you can now disconnect all the hydraulic pipes in safety, but you must protect the open ends from dirt entry. Before refitting the modulator, it's a good idea to remove the bulk of the air from the reservoir like this. Fill it with fluid to the max mark, then carefully tilt the modulator to one side, approximately 45 degrees like this. You can now refit it, and then top up the reservoir and bleed the system in the normal way, using tool SMD 4081. Finally, turn on the ignition and check that the ABS warning light operates correctly. The accumulator on this system is an integral part of the modulator and cannot be renewed separately, but it has to be depressurized like this before disposal. Relieve the high-pressure fluid as we did just now and remove the modulator. Hold it in a vise with this relief plug pointing upwards. Slowly loosen the plug by 3 half turns and then wait for at least 3 minutes until all pressure has escaped. You can now remove the plug completely and dispose of the modulator. If you have to change the fluid in the high pressure system, do it like this. First, bleed off the high pressure slowly as we showed you just now, then leave the nipple open. Make sure the tube is still in the container and start the engine. Run the engine until the reservoir is empty, then switch off and tighten the nipple. Obviously air has entered the system during draining, so refill the reservoir and bleed it like this. Fill the reservoir with new fluid to the maximum mark. Start the engine, let it idle until the modulator pump stops, then switch it off. Connect bleed tool SMD 4081 to the maintenance connector under the passenger seat and carry out a bleed procedure just as you would for an ABS 6 system. When you've done that, bleed fluid from the modulator. Then continue to repeat the bleed procedure until you get bubble-free fluid from the modulator. Don't forget to keep the reservoir topped up. Finally, start the engine and check that the ABS warning light goes out.
There is one important check that we want to tell you about. The modulator contains a valve which must close the fluid port to the solenoid valves if the high-pressure system fails, so that conventional braking is maintained. Make the check like this. Relieve the high-pressure system, as we showed you before, then raise the car off the ground, wheel-free, making sure it's safe.
Get someone to press the brake pedal while you check that none of the wheels can turn. Check that the bleed nipple is tight, then fill the reservoir to the max mark. Pour the fluid slowly and allow air bubbles to disperse. Start the engine and let it idle for at least a minute, then switch off. Check the reservoir level, which should now be below the max mark, and top it up again. Finally, start the engine and check that the ABS warning light goes out.
Well, we're nearly at the end of this update video, but before we finish, a quick word about the introduction of the 200 PS turbo engine in the 800. The model is called the V-Test Sport, and in keeping with this image, the suspension has been modified and lowered. Shorter springs all round give a trim height 20 mm lower. Stiffer rake bushes are fitted to the lower arm, and the dampers are modified. Well, that completes this Technician's Update number 5. Thanks for watching.